Welcome back to yet another episode of your Re-Educated podcast. Today, we have an extremely special guest, Raghav Kumar. He is an innovative architect turned natural builder and the co-founder of Tiny Farm Lab, based in Rishikesh, Uttarakhand in India. With a deep commitment to sustainable living and ecological design, he has transformed his career from conventional architecture to embracing natural building techniques that harmonize with the environment. His work focuses on creating small, sustainable living spaces that promote community and connection to nature. Through Tiny Farm Lab, Raghav engages in educating others about sustainable materials and eco-friendly building methods, making significant contributions to the movement for a greener, more sustainable future. How are you doing today?
Hi, Gautam. Thank you so much, firstly, for having me on the podcast. And I'm really stoked to be here having these conversations, which are required in today's world. And I know we've been trying to plan this for quite some time, and I'm happy that we're finally able to do so. And thank you for such a wonderful introduction. I'm doing great today, feeling really positive about my day, and really happy to be here. How are you doing today?
Thanks for asking. Yeah, I mean, it's we have been planning this for a long time. The way I actually became familiarized with your content and just the work that you do is I think you had posted on LinkedIn about maybe a year ago a lot of the things that you were doing in the clay homes that you were building, and I was just fascinated because that was a particular period of my life where I was really interested in how schools were built and what
Right,
role that played in how they actually ended up learning. And I was working
right,
in this school that was nestled in the woods, and they had a philosophy of no doors. So there was no doors
mm-hmm.
in the entire school. It's kind of this like open
Wow,
layout where you from any classroom you can enter any other classroom. And I've noticed what a difference that made on everyone's understanding of what a school was. And that made me really become like, why do we have these such, I don't know, planned out structured buildings that we call
right.
schools? And I found it really terribly unfortunate that we couldn't think more creatively about how to design these schools. So I became really interested in architecture, and I came across your work, and you talk a lot about thinking innovatively about how we even design our homes. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
so I really wanted to get in touch with you, and I'm glad we were able to finally get to have this conversation today. So one
Right.
of the things that I think is most interesting is I'm really curious to kind of understand what your inspirations was growing up that first helped you find love for architecture.
Hmm. That's a pretty interesting question, but honestly, I only came to wrap my heads around this question after I completed architecture. So I had that reflection post that. So, but for me, like until like if I just look at in hindsight, so I just graduated from my school. I just knew, what I don't want to do, and I knew that I did not want to take the conventional path that is of like how an Indian child like is expected to do. Even though I was like a school topper, but I knew that I don't want to go for like that IIT engineering or like take up medical or become a doctor. So I do not want to do that. My dad had architect friends, and he just happened to tell me this is a great profession. I don't know, somehow I didn't feel any retaliation to it, so I just said okay, yes, and that's the only entrance examination that I would have given. And I got into architecture, loved everything about it, 5 years course. But post that, when I finally, like after working for 3 years in a German architecture firm, also post that, when I finally started to build houses by myself with my own hands, with my own labor of love, that is when that reflection hit me. Like it wasn't just like by chance that I fell into like doing architecture. It was, I remember then vividly that when I was 11 or 12, in studying in a place called Ahmedabad in Gujarat, some of my relatives' friends had come from New Zealand. So it was a young couple who was carrying a, like a small model of a bamboo structure that they were. It was made using those ice cream kulfi sticks that we get in India. Those tiny bamboo sticks. So they had made a scaled down model of a structure that they were doing in ghats of Varanasi, basically for, like sheltering for women, where they could change clothes after they take a holy bath. So that, I think that model had a profound impact on me on like two three terms. Like, one, it was like natural material, other was that it was a social cause. And so that was in my mind, I think, deeply ingrained. And apart from that, when I realized as a kid, during the summer vacation when the schools are off, my favorite pastime would be to, like use those cricket stumps or wickets and some bed sheets, find a nook or corner on the terrace, and build a fort by myself, and then invite my friends in to play Monopoly or something like that during vacation. So I was always, trying to find tiny spaces, voids, and build some ephemeral structures. So maybe I already had that knack, and that is why I enjoy like creating these spaces. And architecture has like a lot of problem solving and context. But how I went into architecture, how I thought about architecture, and how I'm practicing it now has had a paradigm shift, like in the past few years, like a complete metamorphosis, if I could say.
Hmm. I like this phrase that you use, ephemeral structures.
Yeah.
And before getting into what that even looks like, I think maybe the main question is something I think is fascinating about the different things that people do is that being a doctor isn't just a profession. It's a lens in which people take on who are in that profession, and that's the way they navigate the world. So when problems
Right.
arise, they think about issues through the lens that their profession may give them. Architecture, I feel like, is a phenomenal one at this, because when I enter a structure, I'm just like, this house always existed here. It was just, someone just, it just plopped here. I don't ever get to
Hmm.
really consider how the size of the door, how much space is between the door and the steps. Every single part of it was like thought out. It wasn't just
Hmm.
coincidental, no part of it. So for you, what was that journey like? What is the lens that architecture has provided you, do you feel like?
Yeah, I think because when you study architecture, it opens a lot of perspective. It is just not like about building a building and understanding materials or maths or structure or engineering. More than that, even when you're like, studying architecture, you have to understand anthropology, you have to understand ergonomics, you have to understand politics, you have to understand the economic situation, you have to understand geology, a little bit of botany. Like, this is not all that is being taught, but you have to do all this on your own, depending how deep you want to dive into a particular project. To do justice to it, you have to understand geography, culture, like traditions. So basically, you are, exposed to all different fields. And because it requires, uh, the conventional commercial architecture requires you to coordinate with almost like 32 vendors, from electrical, plumbing, landscaping consultants. You have to coordinate between them. So it's like a little sort of like, I would say, MBA, also like management and all that thing that you have to do. So basically, an architect has to wear multiple hats. And but that is a conventional architect, who, like, how architect has to, like, go about. But if you see traditionally, this is what I like to tell people now, because this is a great platform to talk about architectural education, because it's called Re-Educated. So I'd like to throw some light on that also, that how architectural education has changed over time. So, like, architect comes from the word architecten, and it has, like, it used to mean chief builder, or chief mason, or chief carpenter. So basically, to get that role, you had to have a lot of hands-on experience, like you had to go through apprenticeships and things like that. But after Renaissance, like, there were people who, like Leon Battista Alberti, and these kind of people who came, and then they made a separation between the architect and the carpenter. In a way, they decided that, okay, now, so architect is that intellectual personality, who can think and like come with ideas, but who will build a little lower to them, and they become the like masons, carpenter, artisans. So during Renaissance, that difference started becoming, creating, and the divide got bigger. That architect is that intellectual person, and the artisan comes lower to it, and the gap only got like widened in industrial like revolution, post world wars, where you wanted to build faster, and that is why you see that the kind of buildings we have been building since then lack soul. And architecture education is also not pretty old, maybe like 150 years old, when we decided we that as architects we can mold nature into any which way we want using technology. And that is why you can see the result that our profession has been responsible for now more than 40% of the carbon footprint that we have. So construction industry has like almost 38%, both in construction and running the buildings. So we need to really rethink our profession now.
Wow. This Thank you for the historical background. I mean, I think
Mhm.
that gives so much context, and this idea that there was this split that was created between the intellectual and the hands-on, I feel like can be seen in so many aspects of education now.
Mhm.
It's terribly unfortunate. I mean, even when you take I talk to this to a lot of my students where, they want to go do all these like really rigorous intellectual things out in the world, but they haven't at the same time taken the time to actually understand the world in which they're actually going to go out into. And so I always ask them, I'm like, wanting to be a computer scientist, for example, is awesome. But computer science is a tool that can be used anywhere. So
Mhm.
to want to just learn the tool is one thing, but then what about learning about the context in which you want to apply the tool? And to learn about
Right.
different contexts, you actually have to be in the world to like, okay, this can be used in healthcare, this can be used in policy, this can be used in tech. I mean, there are so many different areas in which anything
Right.
can be used, and it takes like contextualization to kind of piece those pieces together. And I think that's what
Right.
I'm hearing you say a lot. So in your experiences, how do you think you can merge those two together to not have them separate, but to have the intellectual and the hands-on combined?
I think for that we need to have like a radical shift in education, and it just not need be very theoretical based. Even though we have internships, but we need to go back to the model of like apprenticeship also, like where you get to use those tools, like work, get your hands dirty with materials, whether it's wood, whether it's like mud, stone, whatever. See, because I feel like a lot of buildings, a lot of materials tell you how they want to be used, like how they can be used. The stone will tell you that where you can place it. So we are not very much connected with the materials. It's right now it starts with the intellectual process. We design something and then we go out seeing what industrial materials we are available with, and mostly all those industrial materials available are 8 by 4, because that serves the corporations, that serves the economies of scale, that it serves the standardization, it serves the big corporates only, but it doesn't serve the planet, it doesn't serve the well-being of people. So we are just, like pawns to the industries, and everyone is like lobbying, from like bankers to governments to engineers, to like keep that lobby running. But we don't really question that we should start from the material and like like learn hands on, and then of course intellectual ability is required to do justice to the design, to understand the context. And right now we've been, I feel, uh, in fact exploiting our intellectual abilities, in the sense that we think that our building should stand out. We think that we have like that ego or like superpower to make a statement, make that full building in glass, and let we don't think about that how much air conditioning we will require to, like you keep that building uh, in thermal comfort. So it is more of a ego driven project, that we are only taking inspiration from human relics. Okay, this architect built this building, instead of taking inspiration from nature and see how nature does it. So in a way it is just we're competing, copying each other's work, and not really thinking how it can benefit the people who are going to use it, or how it is going to benefit the planet, or what happens at the end of its life cycle.
Hmm.
Because we're really obsessed with this idea of eternity, like forgetting that everything will die, like the concept of memento mori, basically.
Hmm. Everything. I'm writing that down to touch back on later because I think that's a really
Yeah,
important philosophical difference in how we even approach some of this building.
yeah.
You talk about, because I know for your process, so when you were at university and you did, it was, I'm assuming, very theoretical. And then in the last few years when you ended up, so maybe let's start with what that story was like, and then I'm really curious to touch on what your own personal transformation was to go from the theoretical into the hands-on. Was that difficult? Because sometimes it can feel
Hmm.
very intimidating. So what made you, one, feel discontent with working in the kind of more corporate architect world, and then what do you do now? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I really like to reflect on it also. So when I was an architecture student, we go to architecture college, and we are, of course, like you're first taught about the design principles and all, but quickly, because we live in a world of internet, Pinterest, and like a lot of design magazines available online, where only star architects are celebrated. So like many other of my colleagues, I batchmates, I got influenced by the star architects who are building these iconic buildings throughout the world with like high rise towers, glass, steel, using fancy softwares to push or pull buildings so that they could stand out, they could shine out. So that was my take on architecture also, that I was really fascinated by softwares and the renderings and visual rendering softwares during my college days. And I really looked down upon the vernacular or traditional architecture. I was like, okay, it's great, it was good for that era, but it's not modern, and we need to like give a statement and design buildings aesthetically. And of course, like sustainability for me was always important, only though I did not really understand what true sustainability meant. So I was always eager to do something sustainable, even with modern buildings. But that idea was just very superficial, like just doing, like makeup over a building. So that's what happened also when I started working as a conventional architect in the German architecture firm. My first project, like my baby, I could say, was a play school project. So I had to design a school building, and so that was also a very interesting project. So it was based on this Reggio Emilia, as they say, the pedagogy, and in that pedagogy, that was the brief given to us, that in that pedagogy, the physical environment is the third teacher. So the best we could do in the limited, like commercial setup, was we did design a lead platinum or Griha platinum green building, but in my heart I knew that it was not truly sustainable, because we had used materials which were not sustainable. There was a disconnect between me and the labor, and even though the project came out really well because of the pedagogy that we were trying to solve, and but it wasn't truly sustainable. It was more like you are using mechanical systems and other things to try and showcase it as net zero, or like carbon neutral, all these fancy terms that now we use as a wheel to like hide our dirty laundry, if I could say, as architects, or justify that okay, we are not part of the problem, but unfortunately we are part of the problem. So that is the realization that happened, and that is when I understood, especially during lockdown, while when I was living, like inside a room or my house for like a long duration, I realized that we live in boxes. Like it's something that I feel now, which I tell, that we are actually at war. Like as designers, we are at war against ugliness, because we are not surrounded with ugliness. Like every city has started to look same, and that is why we are not able to identify ourselves to some place. So there's a sort of placelessness or a non-place, and that is also one of the big reasons of loneliness and depression, that our fashion has become same, our buildings look the same, so there's no sense of belonging, and that leads to like isolation, loneliness, and depression. So my practice is also about rediscovering beauty, like how can we go back to that ornamentation, or like other ways of taking inspiration from nature, like what not only designers could feel that beauty, but also how laymen perceive beauty. Like as you said, you used to take buildings for granted. You never thought why a building is making you feel in such a way. Like if you go to like a Japanese shrine, why does it make you feel in a certain way? What is the amount of light that is there? Or if you go to like a building like Sagrada Familia, like the church in cathedral in like Barcelona, which they've been building for 100 years, how does that make you feel? Or why does a pantheon Rome makes you feel different? Like
Hmm.
so that idea of beauty I'm trying to rediscover with my practice right now.
Wow. I mean, I the two things I can kind of relate to on that is the undergrad that I went to in UC. I went to school in San Diego. They had the most
Mm-hmm,
wonderful library I could
mm-hmm,
possibly explain. I mean, it looks like a spaceship. It's just a fascinating building. But so many of us used to talk about it. We were like, we used to enjoy, even though the amount of studying we did in there was insane. There was kind of
mm-hmm,
this feeling that would happen when we'd go in where we're like, okay, well, I'm kind of glad to be here because at least it's this beautiful. And then the same thing when I went to school in Georgetown, the campus itself is quite plain except for this one tower that like is really,
mm-hmm,
the place is known for that. And I really liked what you touched on in terms of like when you have something like that that makes a place stand out, you have something to actually identify with, to feel like, okay, this is what this place represents. When everything just looks the
mm-hmm.
exact same, it's actually, I really understand that it's hard to identify this place with anything. If there's a
Yeah.
loud sound in the back, I want to first say there's this, they play this at 5 o'clock every single day. It's like this whole song. I don't know what it's for, but it gets so loud you can hear it from the entire village. And I
Mm-hmm.
need to ask someone what the song even represents. Could you hear it?
Little bit, I thought, like,
Oh,
but I
okay.
did, I
No,
couldn't pay
it's a really
attention to
interesting
that. Yeah.
song. But yeah, so I think like in that sense, those two buildings mean so much to me because they actually
Mm-hmm.
made my experience in those campuses so different compared to if they had not been there. And so
Mm-hmm.
when you talk about this kind of changing of cities where, places start to look more similar, is that purely only for efficiency reasons?
Yeah, I think so. It's morely efficiency reasons. Plus, even the East is trying to copy the West. So it is also that in the name of globalization, modernization, everything is coming everywhere. And like if you wake up from a hotel and look out from a window, you could be anywhere. It could be Tokyo, it could be New Delhi, it could be New York. You could see like Starbucks, McDonald's. You could see those EY, Deloitte offices in glass buildings. It could be anywhere, like some certain parts of the cities now look same all over. Maybe it could be little, like different when it comes to the street culture still, but fashion now, like now they say that fashion starts from India or Korea and then goes to like US. So things are changing, like it has become so uh, like globalized that you're not able to know where you are at given point in time. But that is exactly when you travel to even places like Japan, India, or any other country, you would want to visit the old parts of the town, because that is where you could actually feel the culture, feel the city, because other
Hmm.
places all look the same. That is how the tourism also, people now are moving beyond hotels. They're even moving beyond Airbnbs now. They're moving for experiential stays because they want something different, because everywhere it is becoming same now. They want a sense of belonging, they want a sense of community, they want to have those interactions
Hmm.
with humans.
To feel something real.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like, yeah. I mean, and so you in university were your plans more to build like these large buildings, and then you transitioned into wanting to build homes. Is that correct?
Yeah, so yeah, of course, like I saw myself as someone who will like build like really cool large buildings, and that will become the icon. But during after like quitting my job, that is why we have named our uh, practice Tiny Farm Lab also. So Tiny Farm Lab, why we have named it so is because I really feel that it comes from the like the Carl Sagan essay, that when he saw the pale blue dot, like in that picture that the Voyager 2 or Voyager 1
Hmm.
captured of Earth, that we're like a tiny speck. So we try and think so big of ourselves that, okay, we need to create these big buildings to be iconic. So I question that part, that it doesn't really matter, like our efforts on one end. But on the other end, I was very much fascinated about the tiny house movement, that we are the only animals who build for our greed and for our not for our need. Basically, a snake will build its whole, a honeybee will build the hexagonal their hive, and basically all animals just do what is required. A termite will build, like they build together. So I was just seeking inspiration from nature, that firstly, if we are talking about sustainable, we can't live and build like 11 room mansions where only two people are living. So that is why I thought like our practice is about building tiny spaces, but building them beautifully and sustainably.
Wow. And so, I mean, even defining this word home, right? I mean, I think you talked about earlier, like understand. I'm so like, I want to do this profession really badly. Like, there's a large part of me that really wants to work in just like understanding.
Mhm.
Because the reason I say this is because the way a home is structured completely reflects one, our definition of what a home is supposed to be. Who's supposed to live in it? How big is the average family? If you live in a place where the average family is four, you're going to have a lot of homes with maybe one bedroom, two bedroom. If you live in a place that's everyone lives together in giant communities, you're not going to have rooms. You're going to have houses with 10 rooms, 15 rooms. This concept that the television is at the front of this every living room is such a cultural kind of choice that at some point someone made that. I've always been so
Mhm.
curious, like why does the TV get so much center space? Why don't we have like something else?
Hmm.
So I have a friend who is working on this concept of like he wants to bring like really amazing light bulbs to have at the center of like homes rather than to replace TVs altogether, to have like these lights that kind of like make you feel as if everyone is sitting around a like a fire. And so something along
Hmm.
those lines, where like the center of the
Yeah.
home would be a light rather than a television. And I think
Hmm.
in these ways there's so many decisions that we don't even think about that completely shape the way that we lead our lives. How close is our home to the homes near us, right? I mean, and I'm curious, there must be so many. Can you maybe share some wisdom on some of these other things that deeply shape our lives but are actually not something we're consciously doing? They're just embedded into the structures that we live in.
Yeah, I think that's a very fascinating question to trace, like what home means right now. And those were some interesting observations, that how we have, instead of sitting in like in a group in front of a fire talking with each other, or like cooking together, we have now started watching television. But I feel that the home has now, it has shifted its meaning from being a shelter to more becoming like a commodity or asset. So that is why people are
Mm,
okay buying like flats which were not designed for them, but those were boxes. They're okay to buy those apartments which are not personal, instead of home that used to be really personal. For example, we generally give this analogy of home to your wedding dress, that how you get it stitched, accustomed to your taste, accustomed to your height, accustomed to your size, everything. But like when it comes to home, we are okay taking up a box, and but we are not okay wearing boxes on our wedding, right? So how are we so easily taking that, like to that every door height should be 7 feet? Who said that? Like earlier, people whoever build their homes, like they build the homes according to the height of the community or height of the people. The door sizes
mm,
had different sizes. Like even, I don't know about Japan, but in traditional Indian villages also, the first door you'll always be a little shorter so that you bend and go inside the house. So those were very much things like based on ergonomics, and shelter was like a revered place. Now it is more like to show off, or it has become that what how much money you would get in the future if you are able to sell it.
Most of the people who own homes don't even live in them.
Yeah,
And that's such
exactly.
so you feel like that's changed kind of,
Hmm.
huh, that is so interesting. So, when do you feel like this change started happening?
I would say that it depends on the, spending capacity of people when they start increasing now. But I would say, it's a paradox also that people are buying flats, but who are these people? These are people who might either have generational wealth, or these are people who are like in their 40s or 50s. But if you see the millennials now, like they cannot, like, if they do not have generational wealth, they cannot afford like apartments, buying those things in city centers, downtown, wherever. So in a way, this also presents that opportunity to go back to how we used to build houses. Like if you see 10, 20 years or 30 years back, like a family would take up a land and build one house. Even in China, there is a saying that a man builds a house and then he dies. Basically, it used to be a very important aspect of living a fulfilled life that you build your own shelter. But now that is changing. People who have the money are just directly buying ready made flats, and millennials do not have the money only. But that presents an opportunity for the millennials to actually go back to the countryside where lands are cheaper and build houses, because when they do that, the overall amount will come out to be cheaper. And uh, when did it exactly start, I cannot say, but yeah, definitely after the industrial revolution and world war, because we built more than we required. Because that time, after the world war devastation, we wanted to build faster, and that is why concrete and steel was used to really build. And they did not think that how a house should look like. And we celebrated architects like Le Corbusier, who said a house is a machine for living. So we started seeing houses as machines. Now the situation has come to, like, we work in soulless cubicles from 9 to 5 and come back to homes that look like factories. So they do not have those traditional wooden columns or that traditional roof, or that sense of, like, planning that you feel in a Japanese village or a traditional Indian village also. So that whole idea of like home and identity is like going for a toss now.
Hmm. Dang. And so, okay, well, now let's get into your structures and your buildings, and in the show notes, I'm going to attach a lot of images of the things that you've done and built over time, because I
Sure.
think it's very important to contextualize the amazing work that you do. You've taken some videos where you kind of walk through these open spaces. I would love if you could, as poetically as you possibly can, kind of explain the experience of walking through one of your homes.
So I think the first home that we have built is a cob house that we call Tiny Farm Food, and it is in the same village where we live. It's a very picturesque site in itself, but a very challenging one also. So to give the listeners an idea, it is perched on the edge of the hill. So on one side you have a valley, and on the other side you get a 270-degree view of the divine Ganges River. And to reach there itself is a 2-kilometer trek through a forest which has elephants, leopards, bears, everything. So the side was quite challenging. The last motorable road is almost 2 kilometers down. So to build there was very challenging. And of course, the first choice is that you use materials what are available to you as near as possible. That's how people used to build earlier. And so we got all the materials that we used to build the house, like almost like 100 meters of the radius of the house, and
Wow.
most of them carried by hand. And of course we ended up using some modern materials also, which we had to get from the city, but again had to carry them over our heads. So also the challenge with building vernacular is that now there are so many forest laws in place. So even if, like, how our indigenous people could just take up tree from the forest because they did it sustainably. Now you are banned, even as indigenous people, to take that resource. So now you have to get that from the city. And so now similarly the slate that they used on the roof got banned, so now you need an alternate for roof. So that is why we had to come up with a neo vernacular approach to this, that we wanted to use natural materials but in a modern way, because the existing palette wasn't available to you. And that is why we decided to build a cob house, because cob is a mixture of clay soil, sand, straw, and water, which you mix like a dough with your feet when you dance over it, and then you apply it. You can imagine it like you're doing a manual 3D printing job, like slowly applying layer by layer to sculpt a house. And so to give you an idea, like, it's a very small house. It's a tiny shelter that which you enter through a stone arch, and we made an outdoor kitchen where we have like a wood fired pizza oven where people can cook pizzas and sit alongside a bonfire in autumn and winter. And inside the house, the spaces have been thought as verbs and not as rooms. So we have a cooking space, we have a living space where again we have a fireplace, a love seat where a couple can sit and enjoy the view and take in some sun. And then there's a cave like sleeping area, just followed by a bathroom which is finished in a Moroccan traditional plastering technique, which is called tadlat. So even bathing is a spiritual experience in the house. So people do say that when they enter the house, they feel the love and the effort that has gone in building the house, because during the process of building, we had more than 100 people from over 18 countries who were already traveling to India come and volunteer to build that house and put in their loving energies into the house. So we used to dance from Hindi Punjabi songs like Tunak Tunak Tum, from like Japanese rock to German techno, and like build that house just like, enjoying with a lot of love, laughter. So people can feel that uh, vibe and love inside the house, and you sleep also well, and you wake up fresh. And there's people say that they feel more creative when inside that shelter, because there are no straight rectilinear 90-degree edges. Everything is like curved and natural, like how organic, how you find it in nature. So that's like a small description about the house. And it also has a garden roof over it, so it's a garden on top of the roof.
Wow. And so who lives in this home now?
Right now we have opened up it as an Airbnb of sorts, so people can come and experience natural living. So we get people from all walks of life who are interested in sustainability and natural living come and experience how it is to live in the house. And the idea is also to break myths around natural building, that a mud house doesn't melt in the rain, or it is long lasting. It doesn't need more maintenance than a traditional concrete house would need. So the idea is to debunk all those myths by allowing people to come and live there and touch the house, feel the house.
Wow. And so everyone walks through this jungle?
Yeah, they take that trek, like 2 kilometer trek, and reach the house.
That's pretty. So, I mean, have you ever seen any of these leopards or whatever?
Yeah, like elephant is like very common. It's a wild elephant. Leopard we have seen once or twice in the night only, but from far away. But elephant is pretty common.
Whoa. And the elephants will just walk by you, or how does how
No,
does it
no, no.
work?
It's a pretty wild elephant. So if you happen to be in a one-on-one situation, you will be dead for sure, because it is a solitary elephant. So we've seen it from always far or in the night, like coming in the fields and stuff.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow. And so, are you going back into this village to build more homes, or what is kind of the vision that you have?
So for that village, yeah, we do have an opportunity. Maybe someone else has bought land and they would want to build something like this. But because most of the land is forest land, there is not much building opportunity. But idea is to host more workshops, explore more materials that are there in the bio region, like banana fiber, some other fibrous trees that are there. What How can we use those indigenous materials to come up with new biocomposite materials that can be used in the industry, which are biodegradable, long lasting. So to continue that research from that village, because that has become our base, and we are actually now consulting people both online and offline how they can build their own natural homes also.
Mhm. So connecting this to schools in some ways, the
Hmm.
question that I'm really curious to ask is, I'm thinking about the public school that I went to, for example. We had a rotunda, which,
Hmm.
uh, yeah, so like we had a rotunda, which is kind of like this for listeners. It's this circular thing where all the hallways are connected. And so I've been talking to a lot of people from my town, and they've been speaking about the history of the inception of the school. And it was very deliberate why they wanted to have the rotunda. The whole idea of the school originally was to have this kind of interconnected nature of all the classes, all the classrooms. There was no rooms even. Apparently there were just these long hallways where different teachers would take up spaces. And
Hmm.
it's fascinating how it's changed. I mean, now it looks very, buildings. They've actually just, because they had an extra 1,500 students or so, they took a beautiful lawn and they built a bunch of buildings on it. So now it's just all concrete. And my question for you is, I guess, for schools in places that already have converted into that more concrete jungle-esque aesthetic, what can they do from this without tearing it all down to still start reclaiming some of those spaces and to make it feel more human?
I think with the spaces, I think they'll have to do a little bit of retrofitting for sure, like opening up more to nature, wherever like they have ground connection, they can do that architecturally. But also, other than that, like I've seen like how now schools have started exposing the children on field trips and taking them to such farms and practices where they get exposed to these kind of activities and workshops. So I wouldn't say that they won't be able to do much change with the architecture apart from like maybe changing the finishes of the plaster, like converting it into a mud plaster, or creating some cave like spaces within the boxes, trying to, like curve those right angles. And there's a great example of a school. It's called Meti School in Bangladesh, METI, where it's, even though it was made from scratch, like using bamboo and mud, but it gives a great idea on how a cave spaces like in a classroom can have an impact on children, where they could, look, go hide, study, play, and those kind of things. So even the idea is how you can break the box within the box. So that is something that we can do architecturally. And yeah, apart from that, expose them as much as possible, because nowadays children don't even know like how a tomato plant looks like. For them, they think it comes from the supermarket. So to have those kind of practices, use their green areas to have permaculture farms. So all these little things they can start with within their existing setup, I believe.
Green areas would be amazing. I saw in my elementary school they're slowly trying to build a few tiny little plots just for kids to like be able to like garden. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, there's, I think so much of this conversation ties into our desire to make everything as efficient as possible. What are your
Hmm.
thoughts on how you kind of balance both of these requirements? Because someone may say that, okay, if we hand built everything, it would just take too long, which may or may
Hmm.
not be a valid argument. But what are your thoughts on how do we balance this need to make things human while at the same time being like sometimes, but we also have to deal with efficiency and scale?
I think it is a broader topic, not only related to architecture. The slow movement has penetrated all fields, like all aspects of a life, whether it is the slow food movement, which is against, like a rebellion towards the fast food, or whether it is slow fashion, which is against the fast fashion, and same is goes for like slow architecture, doing it well, understanding the context, like at least spend a year understanding context and respond to it as you build. And so all these things are there. So the whole idea of fast fashion, fast food, speed dating, we live in a very accelerated society too. It's a societal shift that needs to happen. And there are so many people who are wanting to do that, slow down and, like, pause and smell the roses. So it's not for everyone, I would say, but I think people are having their own realizations. Some people might have it in their 30s, some have it in their 50s, but they do realize that they need to slow down, and life is short and time is the most precious thing. So you can say that time is what we have and what we don't. So we really need to see how we want to use it and like really make something good, like relish the process itself and make something personal versus, like, because even though technology was meant to, like, give us more time, but facts have shown us that certainly we don't, we'll always fill it with other things. So even though if we save time in building our house, we still wouldn't have time to do any other thing. So you rather take it as a process, take it as an act of creation and do it well, and with a lot of
Hmm.
reverence, and take it as a sacred process. So it is how you change your lens and see this, because clothing, shelter, and food are, I think, in Hindi also they say roti, kapda, makan are the three most fundamental things. And in fact, we are earning so much, or we are slogging so hard throughout the day so that we could have those three things done well, right? So if we are not doing those things also, then what's the point of running the rat race itself?
Hmm. I feel like a lot of your experiences has given you time to reflect and introspect on some of these things.
Yeah, definitely.
Nice. And so if people want to get involved or maybe learn more, I mean, because I remember you had posted once about how challenging it was on your body to transition from always sitting at a desk to eventually having to
Mhm.
physically do all the things that you do. What was that process and transformation like? And how does your, I guess, your physical body feel now to be able to build a home, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's a great question. And we were always city kids, my brother and me. We had no rural ancestral backgrounds, or we never used to go to villages. The only physical activity we had in the mountains was when we used to go for an occasional trekking trip in a once a year or something. But to do it every day was a very difficult task. But our human bodies are very adaptable, and once you do it, so it was more like an intentional choice that instead of going and paying the gym every day, we put, because I never like followed a gym subscription past 5 days, so that wasn't my thing. So I put myself into an environment where I had no choice but to hike and get in those 10,000 steps anyway. So that was the thing, and body adapts very quickly, and you feel so good about it. You feel fit automatically instead of trying to take out extra time in the day to go to that gym in a air conditioned car and come back in that. So that is what we did not want to do, and the lifestyle only we wanted to create, that we have those moments of fitness. That's what people in the blue zones also did, like even Japan, Italy, wherever the blue zones are, where people go on and live more than 100. Their terrains or their daily routine was like that, that the physical activity was built in. And even
Mm.
though when I come back to the city, it is very easy to gain weight, or very easy to like get back to into the routine where you are sit, because you get out of the house, you can take a cab, and then you are at the location. So here again you could feel that lethargy coming in and your body's becoming obese again. But that's why I look forward to going back and getting into that routine, even though it feels tough. But I know it that discomfort is good for my body and in the long term.
Mm. Hmm. What is your vision of for the future? Are you interested in kind of working on some schools at any point?
Yeah, definitely. I think my first project was school, and I did research almost like 3 years on different kinds of schools, the history of schools, and everything. So
Wow.
I'm very much interested. But now the only difference would be that that time I did try and make the physical environment as a third teacher. But right now, if I do build a school, it would be a lot of emphasis would be put on materials also, which wasn't the case early on, and also maybe involving the students or whatever that they build the school together, so has to have a sense of belonging, a sense of community. So I would love to do such a project, an alternate kind of educational school or something like that, and with natural materials.
Nice. I'm really looking forward to that. I'll
Yeah.
connect all your platforms. And do you have a website that people can find you on?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for asking. It's called Tiny Farm Lab, TinyFarmLab.com, Tiny Farm Lab. And the
Tiny
same
Farm
handles
Lab.
on, yeah, the same handle, Tiny Farm Lab, on Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, everywhere.
Great. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing all this. I think this conversation was really important. It was our first on this podcast about architecture, but I hope it opens a door for a lot more in the future.
Thank you, Gautam, for having me here. I was also very keen on sharing insights, especially where education intersects with architecture. So it was very insightful knowing your perspectives also.
And that brings us to the end of our conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you again for listening and making this process so much more enjoyable. If you haven't had the chance to already, make sure to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts to get the latest updates on new episodes. If you've been learning useful information here, feel free to leave a review as well. A little bit goes a long way in spreading this podcast. And have a wonderful day. And as per usual, stay re-educated.